Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. Before we get into this loaded episode for you guys today, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. Also like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also the audio from this episode will be uploaded to Spotify, and all links are in the description. Since the Rams won their Super Bowl just a season ago, it's been a really hard 2022 season. They finished just 6-11, and it was just a disappointing year when many people thought that they would go back to the Super Bowl yet again. Now, they did suffer a ton of injuries. We saw Matthew Stafford miss significant time due to elbow and spinal cord injuries. Cooper Kupp, the league's leading receiver back in 2021, and also defensive standout Aaron Donald missed significant time due to high ankle sprain. Sean McVay is going to be coming back next season, and he's been mulling potentially leaving the Rams for a TV gig, but it just seems that all these gigs have been already filled up, so I think he'll be staying on for the foreseeable future. When you factor in also the lack of young talent, because they made a lot of moves to acquire a lot of good talent like Jalen Ramsey, Matthew Stafford, the GM said F them picks. And I get it, you sell your soul for a Super Bowl and everything lined up for 2021, and now this is when you pay the piper and you see these big drop-offs the next year where injuries may happen and there's not a lot of talent there to replace them because you just don't have adequate talent when your first and second round picks are traded to other teams. We've seen that Jalen Ramsey is potentially going to be moved due to just salary cap restraints, and then they already released Bobby Wagner, one of their best free agent signings that they made. They're probably going to have to restructure a lot of other guys too to free up cap room to at least round out the roster. So I expect a guy like Jalen Ramsey to command at least a second, maybe a third round pick. He's been a very good talent as a cornerback and still fairly young. He's only 28, not a lot of injury history, so I expect them to get a pretty decent return on that investment. It's just that they won't get multiple first round picks like what they did to acquire him from the Jacksonville Jaguars a few years ago. And then with Bobby Wagner, I mean, just giving him up for alleviate about $5 million against the cap, I just don't know what the move was. I think Bobby Wagner still has a lot left in the tank, so look for a lot of these contending teams who made these deep postseason runs to try and get these guys onto their teams. We know that the Bills are still looking to retool because they need to shore up that defense. They already have Von Miller, who was a teammate of Jalen Ramsey. I'm sure they would be interested in working together and trying to recruit him over to the Buffalo Bills, but also other contenders like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, who will need to replace James Bradbury if he walks in free agency. So I think they'll definitely give the LA Rams a call and see what the value is for a Jalen Ramsey trade. Expect a Rams rebuild because I think now, like I said, they just have to pay the piper and there'll be a considerable drop off because Matthew Stafford is aging and I don't think they'll be able to recreate the same amount of magic that they had just a couple seasons ago. With the NFL Combine coming up, there's been a stern warning from former Combine standout Byron Jones. He's been a cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys, and for now he's a cornerback for the Miami Dolphins. He's had a pretty solid career. I mean, a Pro Bowl appearance, second team All-Pro back in 2018. He's known for setting the world record for the broad jump back in his Combine appearance in 2015. And the issue is he came up with a slew of tweets on Saturday afternoon saying that players coming into this Combine should be aware of taking pills or shots for any sort of nagging injuries that they may or may not have coming into this Combine, and do not trust the doctors. And it's just really interesting because, you know, you expect these doctors to look out for the best interests of the players and also the franchises that are looking to draft them as well. But the NFL has had a history of suspect behavior. We know about Chris Maragos, who just was awarded over $40 million in compensation due to misdiagnoses and poor treatment after suffering a PCL injury back in 2017. So the NFL needs to work on improving player safety, and they made those strides thankfully with those concussions and lower body injuries, but still just in terms of just taking care of their players, I expect Byron Jones to place a lawsuit against the NFL and probably come up with a pretty hefty sum if he can prove that in court. In another hapless Chelsea performance, we saw the Blues drop another game, this time to their London rivals Tottenham Hotspur 2-0. This is again just very poor play. I mean, they were thankful not to be playing with 10 men because Ziyech was bound to get a red card, which he initially was, but it was overturned to a simple yellow card, so Chelsea still had 10 men on the field, but still a banger in the second half just immediately after halftime pretty much set the tone for Tottenham that they were just not meant to be played around with. And then the following goal pretty much iced the game from there. This just begs the question, when will Graham Potter be sacked? Because Todd Bowley, this was this guy that he decided to pick over Thomas Tuchel back in the fall, and it just hasn't worked. Since November, they've only patched together 3 victories, and that's been over the span of 15 matches. The Blues are in desperate needs for a new voice in this locker room. I think they may just ride out the season and sack him, but it just depends because this is a new ownership, and we've known that this is his guy. And I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to listen or withstand the cries from Blues faithfuls, including myself, because I think it's just time to look into a new manager because they're just simply wasting their time with Graham Potter. In the second week of Champions League Leg 1 of the round of 16, we got to see Real Madrid take on Liverpool. This is a rematch of the 2022 Champions League final, and again Real Madrid just seems to have Liverpool's number. We remember back in 2018 they beat them 3-1, beat them again in 2022, and this time, despite being down pretty early in the match 2-0, they reeled off 5 goals at the on-field, and that's just a phenomenal feat. I mean, Karim Benzema came up with the brace and just numerous contributions from various other players for Los Blancos. So I think this is just another example of how well this organization has been run, and I think they're primed for another deep run because I don't know who else can really challenge them because they're just so loaded. They just wake up for this tournament every season. They came off a semifinal appearance 2 years ago. They won it all. And I really only think that Manchester City just has the firepower to contend with them. But this is just a tournament. No matter how talented you are, if you just face a team that has the chemistry and the wherewithal to overcome all the odds that have been stacked against them, because we've seen Real Madrid be waking up from nearly their last gas time in and time out, and they've been able to produce. I see them beating Liverpool quite handedly in their home stretch in the Bernabeu, and I don't know exactly what they'll draw in the quarterfinals, but they're really going to be a tough out for any other team. We saw RB Leipzig pick up a nice draw at home against Manchester City. This is a nice way to come up with momentum because despite them having to go onto the road at the Etihad with such a talented opponent under Pep Guardiola, if you're RB Leipzig, you got to come in with a nothing to lose mentality because you made it this far, and despite you probably being the lesser talented squad, this is Champions League after all, and anything can happen. Man City has to get off to a strong start and bury this opponent early because the longer it lingers on and they get a late goal, I think this really bodes some trouble for Man City. Inter Milan's Romelu Lukaku has had some issues finishing. We know about his struggles back in the World Cup. He had 3 or 4 good looks for Belgium, and that led to their eventual elimination in group play, and this time he found the back of the net at this in the right moment for Inter Milan to propel his team to a nice win, and I think this may give him some help moving on in the season because he's been really struggling in form. I really see Inter Milan as the favorites to advance in their matchup to the quarterfinal stages. Napoli handled business against Frankfurt. They won 2-0, and I think they're just another example of how this team has just been so good, especially in Serie A play. Frankfurt has been a nice story just to make it this far, don't get me wrong, but it's just so hard to play it, especially when you give up 2 goals at home. So I think Napoli will also coast to the quarterfinals as well. The All-Star break is over in the NBA, and we now resume to the stretch run, and we got a lot of great storylines coming into a loaded slate of weekend games. To start off with the Friday night slate with the Clippers taking on the Sacramento Kings, and I mean, this was an epic game. I mean, double overtime, the 4th highest combined score, with the Kings winning 176-175. This was Russell Westbrook's debut. I gotta say, I've been a critic of his, but in his debut at least he was phenomenal. A very efficient 7 out of 13 and racking up the assists, putting those guys in positions to succeed. And also, he's having the trust of his Clippers teammates. We know that Paul George, who's been Russell Westbrook's teammate back in their OKC days, he trusted Russell Westbrook and he passed it out to him on the right elbow, and he swished a 3-pointer that really helps Russ's confidence, especially from the outside, because he's been really struggling from there the last 2-3 seasons. But still, the Clippers came away with a loss. I still think that they'll be a very tough out for any team because they're still trying to play this epic chemistry game in the lab, trying to tweak the lineups and see what exactly works, but they still have about 20 games to figure it out before the postseason comes around. For the Kings, I mean, this is another nice victory on the road at the Crypto.com arena. I think we need to really stop sleeping on this team. I've been high on them since they came out pretty much in November, but I think the league needs to really put some respect on the Sacramento Kings, and they've been looking very impressive. They have a few more games to play this season against some very good competition. We get to see them against the Phoenix Suns and then also host the LA Clippers later on this season. So if they can pile up some more wins and hold on to that 3 seed, even move up to this 2 seed, I think this Kings team could be a sleeper team to get to the Western Conference Finals, depending on the matchups. Now, of course, Phoenix is loaded. The Clippers are also loaded, and they have to try to find a way to avoid those teams. But if the dominoes fall in a certain way, I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings make a deep run. The Celtics came up with a nice victory against the Philadelphia 76ers, and again, another nice performance by Joel Embiid. I mean, 42 points, 17 rebounds, but it just wasn't enough as they squandered a 15-point lead, and it later turned into a 10-point deficit against the Boston Celtics. Great performance late, at least, by Jason Tatum. He struggled for most of the game, but he came up with a nice go-ahead three-pointer to put his team up. And despite Joel Embiid throwing it up from about 3/4 court and swishing it, nothing but net, unfortunately, it was just a hair too late, and the Celtics came away with the victory, winning by 3 points. They hold on to the East top seed as the Milwaukee Bucks are still riding that 14-game win streak, so they're doing everything they can to keep the Bucks at bay. I think the Celtics are showing some vulnerabilities. They haven't been the most crisp, but they're still finding ways to win. I think the Bucks are just a team that just maybe if they can get Chris Middleton healthy, consistently playing well, that they can overtake the Boston Celtics to be the East top seed, but we'll have to see how it shakes out. The Sixers have some interesting questions though for this stretch run. They need to find a way to hopefully get a favorable second round matchup. They're still very much in contention for the East top seed. I think Joel Embiid deserves plenty of flowers. I mean, he's just been having another MVP type season, just probably going to miss out on it again to another historic season by Nikola Jokic. But still, it just poses the question though, will this Sixers core get it done? Because if he again fails to make the conference finals, because he's never done that in his career now, is it all his fault? No, absolutely not. It's a team game and it's not solely due to him, but there's been other guys who've been so good as individual talents. We've seen Tracy McGrady, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, for example. They've only made probably about 1 or 2 conference finals appearances in their careers, and that's no slight on them. I mean, like I said, it's a team game, but he could go down as one of these great players that just doesn't make deep postseason runs. And with James Harden potentially leaving, is there's already rumors of him potentially returning to the Houston Rockets this offseason because he's a free agent. I don't know what exactly will happen, but the Sixers really need to find a way to break through and get a deep postseason run. On Sunday, the Lakers completed a 24-point comeback against the Dallas Mavericks, and really good play, especially from LeBron, Anthony Davis, and also these new acquisitions that they made because they're kind of a new look team. Before the All-Star break, we all know that the Lakers traded away Russell Westbrook, and they got a lot of decent players back. They got D'Angelo Russell, who used to play for the Lakers in his younger days, and also Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley. So a nice haul for Russell Westbrook because he just wasn't the right fit for LA. And since these players have been acquired, each individual has made a significant contribution in this latest LA win streak. In the first game, we saw D'Lo play really well, and he's going to be missing a little bit of time because he rolled his ankle, so I'm not sure when he'll be back. Malik Beasley lit it up from the outside in their second win, and really that's been the thing that's been missing out of this Lakers team is outside shooting. And if he can be a consistent marksman, the Lakers have that three-point shooter that they've been desperately seeking. And finally, when you factor in Jared Vanderbilt's contributions against the Dallas Mavericks, particularly when he locked up Luka Doncic for most of that fourth quarter, it was really impressive because that was the main proponent of how the Lakers were able to come back. With him playing pretty good defense on Luka, slowing him down, tiring him out, he forced a couple turnovers and just forced Luka into really bad shots. That was huge for the Lakers, and they picked up a big victory. And major credit too to Anthony Davis. He played excellent on Sunday, including a clutch fadeaway baseline jumper over Luka Doncic. And this is the problem, I think, with the Mavs, because they just don't have enough size, and a guy like Anthony Davis can really just go to town in the paint. And he's been willing to bang and get a lot of boards. He had a really impressive stat line with 30 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 blocks as well. So if Davis can do this, and it's not just LeBron being a one-man show, I think this Lakers team can get into the play-in and kind of salvage this sort of lost season that we saw earlier. Former Hawks coach Nate McMillan decided to resign as head coach in the recent week, and this led way to Quinn Snyder taking over. He'll be taking over as the Hawks coach on Tuesday. And I think this is a really interesting move, because 2 years ago, Nate McMillan took over midseason and guided the Hawks to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then it was just a big drop-off in 2022 when they made the play-in tournament, got in the 8th seed, and they were knocked out in the first round in 5 games to the top-seeded Miami Heat. This time, it's a very similar kind of standings where they're in the play-in tournament. They did bring in DeJounte Murray, but it's just not really working out so far, with them trying to make some ground in this really stacked Eastern Conference. Earlier this season, Trae Young and McMillan had some issues. When Trae was having issues with his shoulder, he was about to miss some time, and then he was slowly coming back. McMillan wanted to bring him off the bench, and this was just something that Trae Young didn't take very well, and he even missed out on joining his teammates on the bench despite saying that he would. And I think this led to a rift, probably some issues in the locker room, and just something that Nate McMillan didn't want to deal with anymore, leading into his resignation earlier this week. So this is now Quinn Snyder's team, and I don't know what exactly he can do to salvage this season, but he did sign a 5-year contract, so he's going to be with Atlanta for the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens. He had a really nice run with the Utah Jazz and just needed a change of scenery. So maybe this is the change of scenery that we see, and the Hawks will find a reversal of their recent fortunes. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and also listen to the audio from Spotify, as all links are in the description. And until next time, take care and always be safe.